Let me be straight with you. Most men waste months, even years, on women who show clear low-value signs from the beginning. But you don't see them as red flags because they don't look like red flags. They look like personality quirks, bad days, or just how modern women are. You're probably thinking about a woman right now. Maybe you're dating her. Maybe you just started talking to her. There's this feeling in your gut that something's off, but you can't put your finger on it. You ignore it because she's attractive, or you don't want to seem judgmental, or you're hoping things will get better. They won't. The signs you're ignoring now will become the problems you'll regret later. Every man burned by a low-value woman ignored the early warnings. Not because they were blind, but because they didn't know what they were looking at. I'm going to show you exactly what to look for. 6 specific behaviors that reveal low-value character before you're in too deep. This isn't about being paranoid, it's about being smart with your time and protecting yourself from predictable patterns you can see coming if you know where to look. Before we dive in, let me be clear, this isn't about judging all women or looking for perfection. Everyone has flaws. What we're talking about here are patterns, not isolated incidents. A single bad day doesn't make someone low value, but consistent behaviors that reveal how someone operates when things aren't going their way, that's character. And character always reveals itself through small, repeated actions. The key is knowing what you're looking at. Most men miss these signs because they haven't been taught what to look for. So let's change that. Here's what happens to most men. They meet a woman who checks enough boxes. She's attractive, she seems interested, and the chemistry feels real. But then little things start happening that don't sit right. She makes excuses instead of apologies. She's warm when she needs something, but cold when you set a boundary. She talks about herself constantly, but shows little genuine interest in your world. And what do? You rationalize it. You tell yourself she's just stressed from work. She's been hurt before. She needs time to open up. You're not being too picky, you're being understanding. That's what good men do, right? Wrong. Here's the psychology behind this trap. Men are wired to solve problems and protect. When you see concerning behavior in a woman you're attracted to, your instinct isn't to walk away, it's to understand her and help her improve. Add physical attraction to that mix, and your judgment gets clouded fast. The men who end up in toxic relationships aren't stupid, they're just optimistic. They see potential instead of patterns, and by the time those subtle signs turn into obvious problems, they're emotionally invested enough that leaving feels impossible. So what are these 6 hidden signs? Let me walk you through them, starting with the one most men completely overlook. Sign number 1 is selective accountability. This is when a woman takes credit for her successes but deflects blame for her failures. She'll tell you about how hard she worked to get that promotion, but when she's late for your date, it's always traffic, her boss, or something completely out of her control. Now, everyone makes excuses sometimes, but here's what makes this a pattern. Low-value women never say, "I messed up," or "that was my fault." Instead, every negative situation has an external cause, and there's always a detailed explanation ready to go. The psychology here is crucial. People who can't take responsibility can't grow. If nothing is ever their fault, they never have to examine their own behavior, they never have to change. And that means the problems you see early on will only get worse over time because she's not capable of looking inward and improving. Here's how it shows up in dating. She cancels plans last minute and blames her friend for having a crisis. She forgets something important you told her and says you never mentioned it. She snaps at you and justifies it by saying she had a bad day at work. Notice the pattern. The excuses always sound reasonable in isolation. Most men miss this sign because they're focused on the explanation, not the absence of accountability. They hear the excuse and think, "Okay, that makes sense," without realizing she's never once said, "I should have handled that better," or "I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking." Here's what to watch for. In the first month of dating, notice how she talks about past conflicts, mistakes, or failures. If every story positions her as the victim of circumstances or other people's actions, that's your red flag. A woman with character can tell you about a time she was wrong and what she learned from it. The protection strategy is simple. When she makes a mistake that affects you, pay attention to her response. Does she take ownership, or does she immediately explain why it wasn't really her fault? This connects directly to the second hidden sign, conditional respect. This is when a woman's respect for you only exists when you're giving her what she wants. When things are going her way, she's sweet, engaged, and appreciative. But the moment you set a boundary or say no to something, her entire demeanor changes. Here's the subtle part. It doesn't look like disrespect at first. She doesn't insult you or yell. Instead, she gets cold. Her texts become short. Her tone shifts. She becomes distant until you give in and provide what she was asking for. Then suddenly, she's warm again. The psychology reveals everything. Real respect is consistent. It doesn't fluctuate based on whether someone is pleasing you in that moment. When a woman genuinely respects you, she might disagree with your decision, but her fundamental treatment of you doesn't change. She can be disappointed without being disrespectful. Low-value women operate transactionally. They give respect when they're getting what they want and withdraw it when they're not. It's a manipulation tactic disguised as emotional honesty. They'll frame it as "I'm just being real about how I feel," but what they're really doing is punishing you for not complying. Most men miss this because they're focused on the good moments. They remember how sweet she was last week and tell themselves she's just having a bad reaction to this one thing. They don't see the pattern of respect appearing and disappearing based on their compliance. Here's the test. Set a small boundary early on. Something reasonable, like you can't meet up tonight because you have other plans. Watch how she responds. Does she say no problem, let's find another time, or does her whole energy shift? Does she go quiet, give you attitude, or make you feel bad for having your own priorities? A high-value woman respects your boundaries even when they inconvenience her. A low-value woman only respects you when you're convenient. But here's where it gets even more subtle. Sign number 3 is validation addiction. This is a woman who needs constant external validation to feel good about herself. Her self-esteem isn't internal, it's based entirely on how much attention and approval she's getting from the outside world. You'll see this most clearly in her social media behavior. She's constantly posting, checking likes, responding to comments from other guys, fishing for compliments, but it goes deeper than that. In person, she needs you to reassure her constantly. She asks if she looks good, if you still like her, if you think other women are prettier than her, and no amount of reassurance is ever enough. The psychology here is that she doesn't have a stable sense of self-worth. Her value is determined by external feedback, which means it's always fluctuating. One day she feels great because she got a lot of attention. The next day she feels worthless because she didn't, and you become responsible for managing those emotional swings. Most men see this and think it's cute or that she just needs to be built up. They don't realize that you can't fill a bottomless pit. A woman who doesn't value herself will drain you trying to get you to do it for her. And the second you stop providing that constant stream of validation, she'll find someone else who will. Here's what to watch for. Notice how she talks about herself. Does she have a solid sense of who she is, or does she constantly reference what other people think about her? Does her mood depend heavily on external validation? Does she need you to affirm her constantly? A high-value woman has confidence that comes from within. She appreciates compliments, but she doesn't need them to function. She knows her worth, and she's not constantly seeking proof of it from everyone around her. Now, the next 3 signs are even more hidden, and they're the ones that predict everything else about the relationship. You've learned 3 patterns so far, and if you're recognizing them, you're already ahead of most men. But these next ones require even closer attention because they're the hardest to spot. Sign number 4 is a competitive mindset toward you. This is when a woman views the relationship as a competition rather than a partnership. She's not genuinely happy when good things happen to you. Instead, she feels threatened by your success. This one is incredibly subtle because it doesn't look like jealousy at first. She won't say, "I'm threatened by your success." Instead, it shows up as backhanded compliments, subtle undermining, or dismissive comments about your achievements. You get a promotion and she says, "That's cool, but don't let it go to your head." You accomplish something you're proud of and she changes the subject quickly or brings up something she did. The psychology reveals a deep insecurity. A woman who's secure in herself is genuinely happy when her partner succeeds because she sees herself as part of a team. She knows your win is her win. But a low-value woman sees your success as a threat to her position. If you're doing well, she worries it makes her look less impressive by comparison. Most men miss this because the comments seem like playful teasing or just her personality. They rationalize it as "she's just keeping me humble," when really she's unable to celebrate you genuinely. Here's the test. Share good news with her early in dating, something you're legitimately proud of. Watch her immediate reaction before she has time to think about it. Is it genuine excitement and pride, or is there a flash of something else? Does she immediately make it about herself or find a way to diminish what you achieved? This competitive pattern shows up in another way too. Sign number 5 is transactional affection. This is when a woman uses warmth, affection, and intimacy as rewards for compliance and withdraws them as punishment for disagreement. Here's how it manifests. After an argument where you held your ground, she goes cold. No affection, minimal communication, emotional distance. But the moment you give in or apologize for something that wasn't your fault, suddenly she's warm and loving again. The pattern is predictable. You comply, you get warmth. You maintain boundaries, you get the cold shoulder. The psychology here is manipulation disguised as emotional response. She'll frame it as, I just need space when I'm upset, or I don't feel close to you when we disagree. But what's really happening is she's training you. She's teaching you that disagreeing with her or maintaining boundaries comes with an emotional cost, and compliance comes with emotional reward. Low-value women use affection transactionally because they haven't learned how to resolve conflict while maintaining connection. A high-value woman can be upset with you and still show you basic respect and care. She doesn't punish you with emotional withdrawal every time you don't do what she wants. Most men don't recognize this as manipulation because it feels like a natural emotional reaction. They think she's just hurt, or she needs time to process. They don't see that the warmth returning only after they've given in is a pattern, not a coincidence. Here's what to notice. After a disagreement where you maintain a boundary, does her affection come back on its own after some time, or does it only return after you've conceded something? Can she disagree with you without withdrawing all warmth, or is every conflict followed by emotional distance until you comply? A secure woman can be disappointed without being manipulative. An insecure woman uses affection as a bargaining chip, but the final hidden sign ties all of these together. Sign number 6 is victim identity attachment. This is when a woman's entire sense of self is built around being wronged. Her identity is centered on all the ways people have hurt her, betrayed her, or treated her unfairly. Listen to how she talks about her past. Every ex was toxic, every former friend betrayed her. Her family doesn't understand her, her coworkers are against her. She's been hurt so many times, everyone has let her down. Notice what's missing from these stories, any acknowledgement of her own role in these patterns. Here's the psychology. When someone builds their identity around being a victim, they can never take accountability. Because if they admit they contributed to the problem, they lose their victim status. And if they lose that status, they lose their identity. So every conflict, every failure, every ended relationship has to be someone else's fault. This is why victim identity connects to all the other signs. A woman who can't take accountability will never respect you consistently because respect requires acknowledging when she's wrong. She'll need constant validation because being a victim means seeking sympathy. She'll compete with you because your success makes her feel worse about her victim narrative. She'll use affection transactionally because manipulation is how victims try to regain power. Most men fall for this because it triggers their protective instinct. They hear her stories and think she's been hurt, I'll be different, I'll treat her right. They don't realize they're signing up to be the next chapter in her victim story. Here's the clearest indicator. Listen to her stories about past conflicts. Does she ever say, I learned from that, or I should have handled it differently? Or is every story about how someone else wronged her? Zero self-reflection is zero capacity for growth. If she's been the victim in every past relationship, you won't be the exception. You'll just be the next person who hurt her. Now that you understand all 6 signs, here's the uncomfortable truth most men need to hear. You're not just a victim of low-value women. You're often enabling the behavior by tolerating it. Every time you accept an excuse instead of an apology, you're teaching her that selective accountability works. Every time you give in after she withdraws affection, you're reinforcing that transactional affection gets results. When you tolerate conditional respect, you're telling her that her love doesn't need to be consistent. You're training her to be low value by accepting low value behavior. Now, I know how that sounds. It sounds like I'm blaming you for her character flaws. That's not what this is. You're not responsible for who she is, but you are responsible for what you accept. There's a difference between having compassion for someone and being a doormat for someone. Here's the empowering truth. High-value men don't try to fix low-value women. They recognize the patterns early and they walk away with their dignity intact. They understand that tolerating these behaviors doesn't make you patient or understanding. It makes you an enabler of dysfunction. So ask yourself this: are you accepting behavior from her that you know is wrong because you're hoping she'll change? Are you making excuses for her patterns because you're attracted to her? Because if you are, you're not protecting yourself. You're participating in your own decline. The men who end up in healthy relationships aren't lucky, they're selective. They see these signs and they have the self-respect to walk away before they're too invested. That's the difference. So let me ask you this. Which of these 6 signs have you experienced? Maybe you're seeing them right now in someone you're dating. Maybe you're recognizing patterns from past relationships that you didn't have words for before. Drop a comment and let me know which sign hit closest to home for you. I read every single comment on these videos because this isn't just about me talking at you. This is a conversation. I want to hear your experiences, your stories, and what you're learning as you navigate this. Your perspective matters here. Because this channel isn't just about dating advice, it's about building a community of men who refuse to settle for dysfunction disguised as love. Men who understand that having standards isn't being judgmental, it's being self-aware. Men who recognize that walking away from the wrong person is just as important as choosing the right one. You're not here by accident. You're here because you're serious about protecting yourself and building something real. And that puts you ahead of most men who are still making excuses for behavior they know deep down is unacceptable. Remember this. You deserve a woman who brings out the best in you, not someone you have to manage, fix, or tolerate. Don't apologize for having standards. Don't feel guilty for walking away from patterns that will only get worse. High-value men don't chase low-value women. They recognize the signs, they trust their gut, and they move forward with their dignity intact. That's what this is about. Protecting yourself with clarity and building the life you actually want.